Hi, I'm Charlie Melcher, and I'm the founder of the Future of Storytelling Summit, and I'd like to welcome you to today's Future of Storytelling speaker series. This online forum is an opportunity for us to discuss different trends in storytelling in the digital age, and we're very excited today to have with us Susan Bonds from 42 Entertainment. Hi, Susan. Welcome.
Hello.
Susan is the CEO and co-founder of 42 Entertainment, which, as many of you know, is one of the foremost companies that's at the heart of, I guess, what people traditionally call transmedia storytelling, having done some of the historic transmedia stories, such as The Dark Knight and 9 Inch Nails' Year Zero. Susan, thanks for taking the time to join us today. We're really excited to have you with us.
Nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
I also wanted to say that this is an open conversation, and so we encourage anyone who's watching to join us and to share questions. You can do that through the chat box on Google+, or tweet us at FOST.org, and we look forward to having you share your questions with us. So, Susan, I thought to start off today's conversation, we might share a small clip from the FOST video that you did with us for the summit. So why don't we show that and have that be a nice introduction?
Great.
The way we define connected immersion today is really bringing stories to life in a holistic way. And that's storytelling that surrounds you, seamlessly incorporating technology, using the world as your stage or your platform, and bringing in the audience and letting them have a voice and letting them have a meaningful role in the story, both personally and as part of a bigger community. We've been experimenting in connected immersion for over a decade now. We've gone past early adopters into a much broader audience who are willing to have more agency in a story, be involved in a story, take some action in a story. And as technology develops, what this is going to mean for us as storytellers is that we're going to have the opportunity to close the distance even more. People are going to be able to live in the worlds that they love.
I love that concept, people will be able to live in the worlds that they love. So, Susan, let's start by, let me ask you, tell us what makes for a great story that is immersive, that has this kind of participation, and that works over multiple platforms. What are some of your keys to making that kind of storytelling?
Well, I think that you do have to start with a story world that is very robust. And by robust, I mean, you know, we can give a dozen examples just off the top of our heads of worlds that people have created that we want to live in. Definitely Lord of the Rings, the Batman universe, you know, decades and decades of comic books and films and television shows. And so these are worlds that have been created from a blank sheet of paper, from someone's imagination. But they've been created with such authenticity, detail, conflict, intrigue, you know, mystery, wonder, epicness that we want, you know, we start daydreaming about how can I put myself in that world. I mean, some of the best story worlds that are created are the ones where when you immediately put down the book or walk out of the movie or the television show you start daydreaming about a scenario of yourself in that world. So it's really about starting with a story world that you know that is robust, and I think you see a lot of those come from science fiction and science fiction writers, because when they're writing, there's so much detail that they're putting into it, and science fiction films and fantasy films and that kind of stuff. That's why those worlds kind of are early adopter, easy attractors for having a multitude of vertical integration in.
But so it starts with a robust world, but then you have to apply that across different media. I mean, if we look back, there's always been licensing. I mean, how does this different than just licensing the rights to a game developer or to a comic book or?
Well, the thing that we really have the opportunity for now is to tell stories on platforms that feel like they're the perfect match. You know, so if I'm going to listen in on people's conversation, we'll do that on a mobile device. You know, if there's an opportunity if I'm going to go out and actually have to accomplish a goal quest or defeat something, then that fits a gaming platform better. If there's an epic journey where I'm following a hero character, that might fit the film narrative better. But I think that where the opportunity is now for creators is to say, I'm thinking of this world, and I don't have to be in one story mode or the other. I can have different stories, and as I'm thinking about this, when we started working with people who were creating these fantastic properties and these fantastic entertainment products, they would have developed this entire backstory and on all of this material for an anchor entertainment product, but there was no way for all that other material to get out. So I think it's not just about am I creating something and then am I checking the box of, oh, I could do something on mobile, I could do something social, I could do something in games, like maybe a licensing agreement would, but it's more about how can I tell a story in a way where I'm bringing all these different platforms together, and it's not, and that in itself creates the picture of the story world that I'm actually creating, and it invests people in that world maybe before the movie comes out.
So one thing I'm hearing you say is just to be able to take advantage of each of these different media to do what they do best when you're thinking about employing this story in different ways.
Right. I mean, one of the questions that we wrestled with creatively when we first got started is, what does it mean to be connected? And what does that mean for us as storytellers? What opportunities does that give us that we didn't have before? I mean, we know as creators that, one thing that, being connected does is that you get instant feedback from your audience. You may or may not want that, but you do get it. And, people can now have shared experiences of something as simple as watching a TV show, for anyone who's ever watched Scandal, and following it, instantly on Twitter and feeling like, you have a voice in this thing that you're watching. But I think that, more than anything now, there's an opportunity to say, within this world that we've created, there's stories that you want to tell that are more personal and intimate, but yet you still want to make people feel like there's something bigger. So how do I use all the tools in the toolbox? And what does it really mean when I can get an audience invested? And what can I do with that audience to take the story and the experience to a different level? And I think you're seeing a lot of people do amazing work in that space.
And what kind of skills does this require? I mean, how is this different from the position of the author, the storyteller, from when they're working in just one medium, or when they used to just work in one medium?
Yeah, I'm not sure that hardly anyone today that's creating, especially, whether it's branded entertainment or just content for the web or creating whole new franchises. I think everyone's thinking about connectivity and vertical integration and what does that mean and how can we approach it differently. And I think the winners are the ones who really think it through, because sometimes it's how you introduce an audience to your world, and it's the way that you do it that can really get you a lot of traction and a lot of buzz. And I think that, going back to your question about skill set, there are skill sets that have come up that are specifically about following an experience, following a story, using story as the thread of something across platforms. And one of the biggest disciplines that's come out of that is the idea of experience design. And I came from Disney, where we created attractions, and a lot of the focus all the way through the design process was in protecting the guest experience. So now I think an experience design in the digital age and the opportunity that they have to bring to a creative group is just constantly thinking from the point of view of the audience. What is it I'm seeing? What do I know? How much do I know? What are the pieces that are pulling me in? And just constantly be thinking about, as you go across platform, as it's that creative cohesiveness, it's that consistency that will elevate this work to the next level.
And that just seems so challenging in a way, because first of all, you have so many different kinds of people participating, so many different kinds of audiences, and you can't really always know what the audience is going to do, how they're going to interact. Are there some examples where you've really learned from not getting it quite right?
Well, I think people ask that question, but I find that question, quite frankly, puzzling, because I think that there's so much information, and especially behavioral data, both from digital, from gaming, from social, that to say that you would be completely surprised by how an audience react at this point seems a little counterintuitive. You know, I do think that there are people who are very focused on big data and what is it telling us, and that's informing a lot of, you know, what we're seeing, what we're doing, how content is curated for us. But I think as creatives, you know, not to get just a big data dump and say, okay, well, this is the roadmap for consumer behavior. I think that, you know, your creative instincts matched with, you know, what you know the behavior patterns are for these different platforms. I think you still have to have those creative instincts. You know, you still have to, the story has to come from a place that's authentic. I think, you know, I'll go back to creative cohesiveness. You know, when you form your core creative team, and I think back on any big creative, you know, endeavor, whether it's we're making a film, or we're making a game, or we're making a you know, a theme park attraction, you know, everything bubbles up to there's a creative team that's really trying to keep those pieces and that vision together. And I think that, you know, that same kind of discipline has to be involved when you're using multiple digital platforms and when you're using connectivity.
So I see that we've gotten a question sent in to us, so why don't we answer this, or I'll ask it to you. How can storytellers create a world where the audience can participate without losing control?
I think that's a very good question, and I think that some of the best storytellers today are actually taking that question very seriously. One of the great things that we've been able to experiment with for the past 10 years is giving the audience a role in an immersive cross-platform experience, and giving them a role that feels authentic, that feels like they have some agency, that feels like they could affect the outcome. But I think that, you know, in thinking that through, I think one thing that you have to keep in mind, and I'm going to push the pendulum just a little bit over to the side, is that you're still the creator of that experience. And one of the things that we talked about at FOSS this year is that there has to be a spine of this experience. There has to be a journey that you know that you're taking the audience on. It's not that they can't bring it to life or participate in it, but you can't give total control over it over to the audience. You know, so you have to find that balance. And I think you're seeing some people doing some, you know, pretty creative things. I really liked some of the storytelling that we're seeing now, where people are authentically working, you know, user-generated content into film media. I think that that's really great. But I don't think that you can give total control of an experience that's going across platform to the audience, but I think you should try to give them a meaningful role. So an example of that would be, you know, when we were working on the Dark Knight property that you mentioned, it's like, well, you know, people have read comic books, they've seen TV shows, they've seen films, they really feel like they know this character, they know this world, so how can we give them a legitimate role? It's like, well, let's make them citizens of Gotham City. That's a role that they can embrace because they want to be living in Gotham City. They're spending a lot of their imagination in Gotham City. So let's give them that role, and then let's give them ways where they could do something like they would as citizens of Gotham City. Of course, they would run into the key characters in Gotham City, but then they would also do things and make things happen in Gotham City that they've read about or they've seen on a film.
So again, though, it's giving them some agency, but not too much. I mean, you're still driving the story. You're still.
Well, I don't want to say. I mean, because there are examples of you know, depending on what it is that you're doing. You know, if you're at a location-based installation, or you know, you're doing something that's very reliant on groups of people working together to accomplish something. You know, there's a lot of escape the room experiences that are going on now. But I think if you're crossing platform and if you're weaving story in a world, you know, a linear story and an interactive story, and they're crossing paths, I think you really have to, like a showrunner or like a game developer or like someone who's mapping out a film, you have to make it the roadmap. You have to. It's not that you're you're completely rigid in it. You're flexible. You know, we like to talk about the 80-20 rule, but you have to have, you're creating the majority of that roadmap.
So we have another question that's come in from Twitter. Do the rules for good storytelling change when it's more about experience?
So my answer to that is no. But to expand on it a little bit, it's like, I think the tenets of good storytelling are always the same. And, you know, we've all heard good stories, and we've heard good stories told badly, and we've told, you know, stories in a way that we wish we could take it back and like try it again. We learned how we would get it out there in a different way. But I think that, you know, good storytelling is one that pulls the audience in, that connects with an audience, and I think that, you know, that, yes, when you're bringing experience into it, you are opening it up. There, you are introducing the element of risk, which can be very exciting. So you are opening it up, but you're not breaking good storytelling rules.
I mean, do you think that this type of storytelling ultimately can make for more emotive storytelling? I mean, are we going to get to things where people have a greater sense of empathy, sensory experience? Does that make, sort of by definition, for more powerful storytelling?
Well, one of the things that I said in the film clip that you showed is that, you know, we're trying to close the distance, right? And I think that, you know, I spent a lot of time as a you know, working on attractions at Disney to try to close the distance between the audience and, you know, the ride envelope or the you know, the conveyance that we were putting them through. And I think that what's interesting now is that connectivity, and it doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, all the different, you don't have to check all the boxes, but I think that by letting the audience in and by focusing on what is the experience that I'm letting them have and thinking about all of the experience, including community and social and having them work together, allowing them to work individually, bringing in achievements and competition and bringing it all under our umbrella, I think that can actually create a shorter distance between the audience and being in the world. We call it immersive entertainment. You know, you were talking about, you know, previously about some VR examples, and some of the best ones that you thought were ones where you lay down and it's like you're kind of like all of a sudden you're off kilter and you're thinking about things differently. And I think that's what marrying experience design with good storytelling and good game theory, I think all of those things can kind of bring it into like make that emotional connection so much more impactful. You know, we've seen things where, you know, it starts pulling you in, it uses the pull of entertainment, and then it ends up being a conviction, a movement. I mean, we've seen good entertainment do this. You were just at Sundance, you know, you see some documentaries that make you see the world through in a completely different way. It's like I never thought of it that way. And I think what immersive entertainment experiences can do is let you walk in someone else's shoes. And it's like, I'm seeing the world in a different way. I'm experiencing the world in a different way and through a different lens and through a different frame. And in some ways, I'm getting outside of my comfort zone, and I'm just getting this amazing emotional impact.
You know, I have this theory that that's going to ultimately enable us to have greater empathy with different worldviews, with different cultures, and at some point when we start to walk in the moccasins of you know, Native Americans or people from other countries whose cultures we don't understand. And again, my optimistic view is that ultimately might lead to more harmony in the world through great experiential storytelling. But anyway, those are my two utopian sense to throw in. So we have another question that's come in. Susan, what role do you see new tech like VR playing in connected immersion experiences?
Well, I think that, you know, every new technical platform, you know, that's created, and it's not just technical platform, but it's also business, you know, avenue, and you know, someone tries something and people go, oh, that works, let's, you know, and that opens up a new line of business and then maybe a new opportunity for storytellers, whether it's at a different price point or with different components or whatever. I think all of those things have to be looked at from the point of view of, as a creator and as a story world and connecting with an audience, is they can't be used as gimmicks. You know, they have to be used in a way that feels authentic to the experience and the story that you're trying to tell. And I think that, you know, when you get a new technology toy, you know, it's so exciting to think about, well, what can you do with it? I think that in immersive entertainment experiences, you're not really relying on any one thing. You know, you're really creating this experience, and you're taking people on a journey. And there may be times where you're focused on a specific technology or a specific moment, or you do something out in the real world, or you do something, you have that, you know, that very intimate, you know, revelation that people have. All of those things are used together in immersive entertainment experience. So I think everything that comes up is an opportunity to be evaluated. It has to be matched with the story that you're trying to tell, the audience that you're trying to reach.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't just hold on to it as a gimmick. Now, that said, I'm going to tell you the other side of the coin, which is I do think that that one of the great opportunities with immersive entertainment and cross-platform entertainment is that the way you do it can help you attract an audience. You know, and I think that, you know, you can see that in a lot of examples of our work. If you look at our work, is that it's not just what we're doing it, but it's the way that we're doing it, and that's punctuating the experience with these conversation starters. You know, so we used to watch, you know, television, and then next day around the water cooler we talk about what happened. You know, now there's so many things. It's like, how do you get above the noise? It's like, well, I'll go back to when Dexter started its season a few years ago. You know, they turned all these fountains blood red. You know, so all of a sudden you've got something that's helping you punctuate conversation and getting people into what it is that you're trying to do. So I think that some of the smartest, you know, creative collaborators out there are not just thinking about, you know, how to give the audience an authentic role and what's the roadmap, but what can we do to kind of punctuate and, you know, step function up the awareness of building an audience. One thing that I think we have an opportunity as creatives today, but it's also a challenge, is that you can't just think about, oh, I'm going to make a product and then I'm going to put it out there, you know, and then we're going to start marketing. You have to think about how am I getting an audience invested and how am I bringing that product to market all at the same time. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that is how you're letting people get exposed to and into your world.
Mm-hmm. I mean, a lot of the projects you've worked on have already had large fan bases, right? Because they're starting with a story world or a property that has some recognition, and then you've been able to create an experience that they already, in a way, at least some of them want to be in, right? As you said, like they've already imagined themselves in Gotham City, and they want to. Yeah, you're giving them that opportunity finally to be there and be a citizen in Gotham City. One of the things I'm curious about, and it's the economics of these things. I know that it can be more expensive to create a story that goes all across multiple platforms. How have you found the economics to work? Is it sponsored? Is there any other model?
Well, I think that's, you know, when you're creating, you know, revenue models and you're creating the products that you want to make and, you know, how you're going to connect them all together, you know, who pays for this connective tissue? You know, who pays for community? Who pays for the things that are going to be free, but that are overall, they're not only knitting all of the products in your world together, but they're also elevating them, right? So I think that you have to think that through from a business point of view. And I think people are looking for smart creatives out there that are thinking all the way through not only how to make a product, but how to build an audience at the same time. So it's really about putting together a convincing case. And I'll say this, you know, like there's fantastic things out there, and you and I have talked about this, that are really amazing finds. When you find them, they're just so exquisitely done and just beautiful, but they don't have an audience, right? So it's you've got to find that line between I'm making something amazing and I need to build my audience and let people know, and some of that is not being, just because it's quote unquote new media, use traditional media to let people know and be aware of your products. I think there's a lot of really great models out there, and people are doing things in a really, really interesting way.
So a question that's come in sort of related to that, do you actively work with and recruit leading fanboys/girls when crafting authentic stories and experiences? Do you find people who help to seed it?
So I'm not sure if this is a job inquiry or not, but so we don't actively recruit, no, or seed things. However, when you're thinking about doing something that, like you mentioned, the beauty of working on something original is that you can surprise people. No one knows what to expect. When you work on something that is Lord of the Rings or Star Wars or Batman, there's some expectations there that you should be thinking about.
Right.
So I think that part of the way that we've always approached immersive experiences for things that people know well, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a specific property, but it could be like a crime investigation. There have been so many crime investigation shows that you're not there's an expectation. If you say, hey, we're going to let you investigate this crime, people have expectations now from watching 18 years of CSI. I'm not sure if it's 18, by the way.
Might be more.
So my long-winded answer to your question is that you should take the most invested people, whether it's in the genre or in the sphere of influencers or people who are just fanboys. You should take those people seriously, and you should do something first that both lets them know that their concerns or fears or whatever or expectations about being let into a property are going to be addressed, and also win them over so they can become evangelists. So you don't have the most vocal people being the ones to speak against your whatever it is that you're trying to go. So I call that setting the table, setting the tone right. You take them. If you think about the audience as an inverted triangle, you take the bottom of the triangle and you do something for them first that lets them know, hey, you can buy into this. This if you are someone who has been reading the Lord of the Rings books since you were 11, or you can speak Vulcan. It's like we're letting you know that you don't have to worry. This is going to be something you're going to enjoy. So you're kind of reinforcing that insider status. So setting the tone right with those guys is important, but then you need to quickly move on because you can't just play to that audience.
Wow, this has been so great, Susan. I mean, as whenever we get together, I feel like we could just talk for hours, and would love to actually do that. But I see we're just about coming to the end of our time. One last question for you. Is there a new story that you're working on in some wonderful story world that we can look forward to seeing in the near future?
Well, that's a great question. So yes, we are. We're working on a great new story world called Voyagers, and we're doing it in partnership with Random House, and it's targeting middle school, and it'll be coming out in the fall. Voyager.
Great. Voyager. Okay, we will look forward to it, and perhaps we can highlight it in some way at the Future of Storytelling Summit.
That sounds great.
Great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today. As always, a real delight to get to spend time with you. And I send you a big hug virtually through Google Plus Hangouts, and we'll see you soon.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Bye-bye.
Bye.